One can never predict what treasure or problems might turn up in the world of pawn shops, particularly one as well known as Pawn Stars. Some of the objects are unusual and one of a kind, some are old and uncommon, and some are really startling. These are the things that cause even seasoned professionals to hesitate, questioning whether they are going to come into contact with something that is actually prohibited. Prepare yourselves for the most astounding and legally challenging pawn shop findings ever will be disclosed soon. Imagine having a piece of history that connects a high-ranking government figure to a federal felony, along with the fake $10 money and Secret Service ID. That's precisely what happened when a man brought in a bunch of Jay's stuff. Howard McGrath was the United States former Attorney General. Included in the collection were letters signed by Jay and McGrath's Secret Service ID, half of a $10 bill signed to him, a White House pass, and Edgar Hoover and Hubert Humphrey. These things were purchased by the vendor from McGrath's grandson. The $10 bill was the great surprise. Even if the other objects were fascinating historical artifacts, it was half a fake $10 note. In order to combat widespread counterfeiting, the Secret Service was established in 1865, immediately following the Civil War. Nearly one-third of all money in circulation at the time was counterfeit, posing a serious risk to the nation's financial system. Therefore, stopping counterfeiters was the Secret Service's primary responsibility. The proprietor of the pawn business, Rick, looked at the bill. Tiny red and blue silk threads are weaved into the paper of genuine American currency. The banknote is not authentic if such threads are absent. None of those threads were present on this $10 bill. It was undoubtedly a hoax. It is a federal offense to possess counterfeit currency. Even if the Attorney General received it as a memento, it was nonetheless against the law to possess. The pawn store called in an expert who verified that the bill was a fake and stated that it was illegal to possess. He suggested that giving it to the Secret Service would be the wisest course of action. In the past, counterfeiting was so bad after the Civil War that the Secret Service was established. Whether or not someone intended to use it, possessing counterfeit money is still illegal on a federal level. The desk with the concealed pistol. From uncommon tools to concealed threats, the next item is something from a spy film. A desk that doubles as a pistol. At an estate sale, the seller purchased what she believed to be a charming small desk. She intended to make a guest book out of it. However, she discovered it was more than just a desk when she got it home and attempted to open it. It was a firearm. There's a mystery on this desk. The inkwell functions as a trigger when pressure is applied. A tiny dot and two too-short bullets shoot out through a concealed trapdoor as a hammer falls. The design is quite dangerous despite its cleverness. Rick, the proprietor of the pawn store, had never seen a desk that was the gun, but he had seen firearms concealed in canes, swords, and even cameras. He questioned why someone would create something like that, particularly because the bullet would not have much power because of its small barrel. It appeared to be something new, possibly even a prop from a movie. For Rick, the legality pertaining to antique firearms was the main issue. Since they are regarded as antiques, firearms manufactured prior to 1898 are exempt from government registration requirements. Guns manufactured after 1898, however, need to be registered. On the gun desk, the seller discovered a patent number that began with Patent 1. However, she was unable to read the remainder. As a result, it could have been produced somewhere between the 1890s and roughly 1910. It fell into a gray region as a result. Rick would not be allowed to purchase it if he could not demonstrate that it was manufactured prior to 1898. Furthermore, because it was a concealed gun, it was a concealed weapon. There are stringent rules specific to concealed weapons ownership. According to an expert, Rick would need to have a gunsmith expertly deactivate the desk's gun component in order for it to be lawful. It would be unable to fire as a result. The desk was one of the coolest things Rick had ever seen, and he wanted it badly. However, he was unable to lawfully purchase it until it was deactivated because he was unable to verify its age, and it was a concealed firearm. The guitar with a tortoise shell. A beautiful guitar made of tortoiseshell is the next item on the list. It's lovely, with its oranges, reds, and browns gleaming in the light. However, this beauty has a significant legal issue. People have treasured tortoise shells for hundreds of years. Due to its strength and attractive appearance, it was utilized for a variety of items, including guitar picks, sunglasses, and combs. However, the trade in tortoise shell was outlawed because some tortoise species were becoming endangered. This prohibition began in the early 1970s. In particular, on July 1, 1975, the hawksbill turtle's tortoiseshell was included to a protected list known as CITES Appendix, the Warned. The vendor discovered that comparable items had been seized by governments in Australia and the United Kingdom after purchasing the guitar from another pawn shop. Whether this guitar was manufactured before to or following the prohibition was Rick's main concern. It was against the law to purchase or sell anything created after. Laws pertaining to endangered animals are extremely stringent. It's like finding a bald eagle feather, Rick said. If it turns out to be an eagle feather, even if you believe it to be a turkey feather, you could be fined $10,000. It is not a justification to be ignorant of the law. Rick phoned one of his guitar-savvy friends. According to his acquaintance, these guitars were popular following World War II, brought back from the Pacific, and had the potential to be quite valuable. However, his pal then issued a dire warning. With a 10-foot pole, I wouldn't touch this. He was aware of others who sold such things illegally and were fined $20,000 and placed under house arrest for 10 months. Rick made the decision not to purchase the instrument due to the significant legal dangers and the harsh consequences. It was up to the vendor to determine what she could do with it legally. She was worried that her daughters may visit the jail. The spy camera that scratches. The next thing appears sufficiently benign. A tiny camera that may fit in a person's palm. However, there is a secret on this German Minix 3 spy camera from the 1950s that a pawn shop cannot access. This camera resembles a cigarette lighter in size. One opens it up, turns small dials, and takes a photo. It loads pictures onto film just as other vintage cameras. The seller's mother gave it to them, who inherited it from her dad. In the 1950s, he served in the German military. In order to use it as spending money for their 30th birthday, the seller was hoping to receive around $150. Although it has several serious issues, it is a cool object for collectors. First of all, it makes use of outdated technology, and it is very impossible to find film for it. Second, a social security number and the name Bill McCord were carved into it. Furthermore, Bill McCord is not the vendor. The main issue, though, is that something was etched on the camera and then taken out. This indicates that the serial number was removed via scratching. A scratched-off serial number is a major red flag in the pawn industry. Anything that has had its identifying markers removed cannot be purchased or sold. This is due to the fact that serial numbers aid law enforcement in tracking down objects, particularly those that have been stolen. It would be like purchasing a car without a VIN, without that number. It renders the object untraceable and perhaps vulnerable to theft. It is a significant offense to sell or possess goods with missing or changed serial numbers. Having a firearm is a felony that carries a lengthy prison sentence and hefty penalties. It creates serious legal issues, even for other things. Even if a collector would value the camera at $50 to $60, the pawn shop owner was unable to purchase it. He simply didn't want to handle the legal issues. The identify of a lost ring. The next item represents a significant accomplishment, a 1973 Penn State Orange Bowl ring. This ring symbolizes the renowned football team's perfect season, a proud chapter in the history of sports. The ring was purchased by the vendor from a colleague in need of cash at Penn State. The player's name and number are on the ring. They had a perfect 12, no record. And on one side, the Orange Bulls score. The player was Jeff Clark, a little-used outside linebacker. The owner of the pawn shop, Rick, is a huge fan of championship rings. However, he detected a significant issue with this one. The engraving was gone. Eliminating an engraving from an object renders it unidentifiable, much as the spy camera. An engraved wedding band is completely recognizable. It is impossible to determine who owns it if that engraving is removed. The removal of any identifying mark makes it unlawful for them to purchase or sell anything. The purpose of this law is to stop the sale of stolen items. It is significantly more difficult to return a stolen object to its original owner if it cannot be identified. The deleted engraving rendered this 1973 Penn State ring indestructible, despite the fact that it appeared to be an obvious piece of history. Rick likened it to purchasing a vehicle without a VIN. The seller wanted to sell the ring for $1,500. Even though Rick knew a lot of people who would want the ring and might benefit handsomely from it, he was unable to purchase it. He wouldn't risk getting into trouble because the law is the law. The strange tax stamps for drugs. A collection of tiny, vibrant pieces of paper is the next stop on this tour through the legally opaque world of pawn deals. Although they resemble vintage postage stamps, they serve a much odd purpose. These tax stamps are for controlled substances in North Dakota. A highly strange law was passed by North Dakota lawmakers back in 1989. It required that anyone in possession of illegal narcotics purchase these specific stamps and affix them directly to their drugs. Each color of the stamp represented a different kind of narcotic. Cannabis was covered by green stamps. Cocaine and other substances sold by weight were eligible for blue stamps. Additionally, red stamps applied to substances like heroin that were sold by dosage. It is simple to see why this law did not perform properly. To purchase a stamp who would voluntarily confess to the government that they were in possession of illegal drugs. The majority of drug users most definitely did not want to wave their hands and announce, "Hey, I have illegal drugs here. I must purchase a tax stamp." The law didn't work at all. This law demonstrates how governments occasionally attempt to regulate things that are inherently concealed and unregulated. The law's primary objective was to levy taxes on illegal narcotics. However, criminal activity is carried out covertly to evade detection and punishment. Criminals have no incentive to abide by a tax law that would reveal their illicit activity. Because of this, the stamps are a unique, almost humorous artifact from a government attempt to enact legislation that was well-intentioned but seriously wrong. These stamps become a unique collector's item despite being an odd and unsuccessful law. Seeing them as a piece of strange history, a stamp collector took a set into the pawn store. Online, he had seen that each stamp cost roughly $125. The seller accepted the offer from Rick, the proprietor of the pawn business, who first offered $30 and then $50 for the set. He intended to divide the proceeds with his grandchildren. The moon is still shining. The moon is still shining. The trip then delves into a period of American history that reeks of peril and insurrection. A still moonshine. Once at the center of an illicit operation was this copper device with its winding pipes and huge kettle. The still was discovered at a yard sale, which is an unexpected location for this kind of item. The copper worm and the way it was constructed made it obvious that it was a moonshine still. It was instantly recognized by the antiques buyer and seller. Moonshine is a term for illicit whiskey, despite the fact that many people mistake it for a particular kind of beverage. During Prohibition, when it was illegal to manufacture or sell alcohol, this term was created. To avoid being discovered, they would produce their whiskey at night when the moon was shining. Many people continued to make moonshine even after Prohibition ended and alcohol was once again allowed. Why? Due to the government's high price on legal alcohol, which is roughly $7 per gallon. This kept the dangerous industry alive by making it significantly less expensive to produce and distribute illegal spirits. Moonshining was and is an extremely risky occupation. It is possible for the first 20% of the liquid that exits a still to be toxic. It can even cause blindness. This occurs because toxic substances like methanol, which boils at a lower temperature than the good alcohol, are present in the initial section of the liquid. Inexperienced distillers run the risk of producing a batch that causes blindness or death. This moonshine continues to demonstrate not only unlawful activities but also the grave health hazards associated with creating things without following the law. The still that was delivered to the pawn store was inoperable. Its primary valve required disassembly and repair. Rick first offered $100, then he decided on $150, which the vendor accepted. The seller had demanded $750. Considering he just paid $50 for it, he is making a healthy profit. The card is a secret weapon that cheats. Enter the mysterious realm of vintage gambling, where shrewdness and a secret gadget were used to win and lose millions in addition to pure luck. The next item is an antiquated mechanical mechanism that is utilized as a covert poker cheating tool. It appears to be an odd device resembling a girdle from the early 1900s. It was always tucked behind a drawer out of sight. Since it was against the law, we refer to this gadget as a card holdout. A component known as the thief would stealthily exit a player's sleeve, seize a card, and then yank it back into the sleeve. It rolled smoothly thanks to its spherical joints and fit against the forearm. The player's knees would be attached to it. The gadget would slip out when the player opened their knees, enabling them to switch cards covertly. This is the origin of the proverb, "I have nothing up my sleeve." The vendor obtained it from their grandmother, who advised them not to reveal it to anyone and that it was against the law. Granny inherited it from her husband's grandfather, a San Francisco bar owner. He was requested to hold it by a customer who gave it to him on his way to prison. It was determined by a specialist in magic to be a 1920s or 1930s Martin San Francisco card holder. He clarified that a well-known con artist by the name of Keplinger came up with the concept of a card holdout. Keplinger defrauded folks in San Francisco and along the Barbary Coast until his luck ran out. Gamblers caught him and gave him an option. He had to create these gadgets for them or risk being killed. They all went out cheating after he created the devices, were caught, and were sentenced to life in prison. This gadget is extremely uncommon and in fantastic condition. It is frequently used as a cool display piece or in museums. According to the expert, its potential sale price ranges from $1,500 to $2,200. After some haggling, the vendor accepted Rick's offer of $800, teaching him a valuable negotiation lesson: the automated knife that is hazardous. A seemingly straightforward instrument might occasionally have unexpected legal ramifications. This is true with automated knives, often known as gravity knives or switchblades. The blade of an automated knife opens on its own. This occurs when a button is pressed, however, occasionally it occurs simply from gravity or a wrist flick. They were frequently viewed as dangerous because of their rapid opening. These knives gained a lot of popularity after the 1950s, particularly among young gangsters. Because of this, lawmakers viewed them as dangerous instruments, and they began restricting or outlawing them. For instance, they were outlawed in New York City in 1954. Since those who carried them were viewed as criminals, several other states followed suit. States have many varying and complex regulations regarding automatic knives. What is considered lawful in one state may not be in another. To determine whether a weapon is a gravity knife, some states even employ the wrist flick test. In order to determine whether the blade opens, the wrist is flicked. However, because it depends on the individual's skill level and the state of the knife, this test isn't always fair. Many people have been arrested as a result of carrying common knives that they required for their jobs. There is no federal legislation that prohibits carrying, owning, or possessing a switchblade knife. However, it is unlawful to sell or ship these blades across state lines according to the Federal Switchblade Act of 1958. Additionally, it states they cannot be sent via the United States. Postal Service, except in certain cases for government usage, a person may face federal charges even if they purchase a knife from another state or nation, even if it is allowed in that state. They would be introducing it into interstate trade, which explains this. Criminal charges, which include jail time and fines, may result from carrying or possessing certain weapons in areas where they are prohibited. For instance, carrying a switchblade longer than 2 inches is prohibited in California. They're prohibited even on federal property. The world of pawn shops is full of surprises, from odd tax stamps to old coins. Some things have hidden legal concerns that may convert a straightforward sale into a federal case, but many things have hidden stories. Every transaction is a gamble in this world where value, history, and the law collide.